Welcome, gentle listener. I am Baldermort, and I wish to introduce you to the factions and forces of the Warhammer 40K universe. Today, I would like to go into the subject we have not yet covered: Traitor Astartes. I would note to the existing fan of the Crimson Slaughter to bear with me until the end. It does start rocky, but I sincerely hope that my conclusion will be to your liking. So, let us begin. It is well documented that there were 9 full legions of Astartes, Space Marines, that fell to the corrupting powers of chaos during the period known as the Horus Heresy. These traitors are well documented and well known, even amongst the people of the Imperium. What is not known is that they are not alone. The propaganda surrounding the Adeptus Astartes, the Emperor's own Space Marines, is that they are fearless, tireless, and utterly incorruptible. It is wished that these lies were in fact truth. Although most of the Space Marines are staunch defenders of the Imperium, and the vast majority are tempted and tested, regularly and frequently, and never forswear their fealty, this is not universally true. On occasion, a rarity to be sure, but still an occurrence all too frequent, a chapter of Adeptus Astartes may fall, as their brethren did so long ago. It is never the same way each time, and it is never obvious or blatant. The ways of chaos are many, and the corrupting powers have myriad roots into the hearts of men. Even the near-immortal and near-invincible Space Marines, for they are still fallible. They are still, at their core, human. As an example of the roots and rights that can cause a chapter of shining knights of humanity to fall to degradation and evil, let us now go through the most basic of outlines on the slippery slopes that led to the fall of the Crimson Sabres, who are now universally feared under the guise and banner of the Crimson Slaughter. The Crimson Sabres were a chapter of Adeptus Astartes, Space Marines, that were formed from gene seed around the time of the 36th millennia. Although they began with a full knowledge of their ancestry and pedigree, later events conspired to have this information removed from their history, and even to be seemingly obliterated from the Imperial archives. The Crimson Sabres were noted to be intensely aggressive, and won many accolades in campaigns fought alongside their brethren chapters. They were known to be brave to the point of almost mania, and to be unquenchable in their zeal to bring the Emperor's truth, if not his peace, to any world to which they were called. The determination to shine, and to make a name for themselves, was to be their greatest strength in their early days, but it would eventually become their greatest weakness. For they suffered the same weakness as many chapters formed later in the history of the Imperium. It is easy to see why when one knows the mindset of the Astarte. You see, a Space Marine has no family, and never will have one, as they are forbidden to fraternize and to form relationships with mere mortal humans. Their first and last and only duty is to the Emperor, and to serve as his angels of death. All and any other wishes, drives, or dreams a man may harbor are to be quashed, and replaced with only one goal, one need: to crush the enemies of the Imperium. But there is another aspect to this, which is to shine, to be known and given acclaim and respect as being worthy brothers and ruthless and indefatigable warriors. Although all Marines will claim that they do not care what anyone thinks of them, this is patently not true. The self-image of the warrior and the chapter as a whole is the beginning and end of most of their worth. It is an all too predictable tragedy. The younger chapters can often compare their martial worth, their standing, to that of their peers. With millennia of experience and opportunity to accumulate glory and accomplishment, the older chapters will often overawe their peers and foster competition that is bordering on madness. For how can a new chapter ever dream of coming even close to the honor and accolades of one that has existed for thousands of years before their creation, has fought in hundreds and thousands of battles and campaigns before they had even been formed? Alas, The new chapters must always treat many of their peers as their superiors, and like younger and less confident siblings, they compare themselves and then fall to the slippery slope of envy. To the young chapter, it can become a burden that is almost unbearable to be less than their brothers. If this canker of the soul wheedles its way into their hearts, then it can lead to evil. It can be a useful attribute, as the Imperium often encourages competition to elicit greater zeal and heroism. But it can lead to impetuous and foolhardy actions in a desperate need to try to prove themselves too swiftly. After all, the road to hell is so often paved with good intentions, as the old cliché goes. But a cliché is only thus because it is so often depressingly accurate. Thus it was with the Crimson Sabres. Their initial campaigns were strong starts, and they were lauded by many of their allies as being impressive. It even went so far as for them to be given respect and acclaim by first founding chapters, the Blood Angels, and their Ultramarines no less. A dream come true to most fledgling chapters, but perhaps this strong start raised an expectation that could never be matched. Over the centuries following this, there were issues that should have been seen as an early indicant of something being somewhat amiss. Their actions in the Amalgamation Schism, which I will revisit in more detail in the future, were thus that they actually gained censure from their fellow Adeptus Astartes. But it was only a breach of protocol brought on by this desperate zeal and wish to prove themselves. Alas, they insulted chapters of very high standing by jumping the gun. But their reaction was extreme. Their chapter master, Nigellus, took this as a sign of a seed of self-doubt and tried to staunch the damage by publicly severing all ties to their fellow chapters of Space Marines. He went so far as to repudiate his founding legion and chapter and expunge all records of them from the Crimson Sabres records. His proclamation was that the Sabres would remain loyal, but would have no more contact with other Space Marines. The very definition of petulance. Even when Chapter Nigellus died 100 years later during the Fornstadt Rebellion, his replacement, Chapter Master Drebeck, did not improve matters. Under Drebeck, the chapter excelled and was eager to prove itself, despite severing all ties and claiming it did not care what others thought. Alas, Drebeck became paranoid about their prestige and began to become bitter. The chapter was soon known for their suspiciousness of slight, their negativity, and overly critical appraisal of all others in response. Like a wounded animal, they began to bite at any who they construed as jeering or sneering at them. Due to the paranoia of Drebeck and its echo in the captains beneath him, it was all too regular. The Crimson Sabres were engaged in the campaigns of the Age of Redemption and did surpassing work in the field, but were struck with another blow that only compounded their wounded pride. In their absence, the system that was their home, Krakatoa, fell to a demonic onslaught. Many of the worlds were subject to exterminatus, including their own fortress world. They were relocated to the Rogon system, but this perceived failure, this further stain on their honor, only drove them further into seclusion and defensive snarls. In the minds of the Crimson Sabres, the other chapters laughed at them for the failure to protect and keep pure their own home system. Whatever the truth of the matter, it was a chip that was added to those already festooning their armored pauldrons, their shoulders. With this perceived slur on their honor, the Crimson Sabres accelerated their fall. 100 years of excellent, if very aggressive, service to the Imperium continued, until the events of the jungle world of Umidia. The Crimson Sabres were called in to put down an uprising of the Balathu cult, an infestation of chaos worshippers. Alas, as the war raged on, the augurs of the Sabres detected more and more infestations wherever they scanned. Thus the Sabres went on to call in their entire chapter. And as time went on, they expunged every last nest of vileness, only to find that they had eradicated all life on the planet. The repercussions of this were simple. Some state it was a revenge of the latently psychic people of the world. Some say it was a curse from Khorne, the chaos god of blood and slaughter. No matter the cause, the Crimson Sabres found that they were haunted by their actions and the very souls of those they had slain, and that they could gain no peace. The only way to calm their minds and souls was when they were in the throes of battle. Like a psychic emulation of the butcher's nails of Angron, the Crimson Fist could only gain peace when wreaking havoc and massacre. This was the only time that the mournful memories of the people of Umidia were silent. They were called to another world, where another outbreak of the Balathu cult had emerged, Demetra. But when they made planetfall, they were like ravening beasts, and put the whole world's population to the sword as they had on Umidia, but with far less restraint. After the massacre at Demetra, the chapter was declared excommunicatus traitores. They were declared anathema to the Imperium and an enemy of the state. With this new unquenchable thirst for combat and massacre, to cease the endless screams of those they had already slaughtered, they had to decide. The Crimson Sabres were still loyal in their hearts, if not their minds and souls, unless they decided to take their thirst for battle and apply it to the enemies of the Imperium, as they simply could not control it. They would direct it instead. With this honorable decision made, they took flight for the Eye of Terror, the place where the warp bled into the real world and was a doorway to that hellish dimension. Once inside, they went on a rampage that would have made the sons of Dawn or Sanguinius proud. They put every mutant, traitor, or neverborn they encountered to the sword and the bolter. They killed the enemies of the Imperium for so long that they changed in their motivations, slowly by slowly, and their methods crept further and further into damnation. After centuries of this carnage, this slaughter, they were twisted beyond recognition, exposed to the warp and to ever-increasingly vile actions and their own activities. They mutated into full-blown warriors of the Chaos Powers, devotees of the blood god, Khorne. But this turned out to be the best thing that ever happened for the warriors, for they had always felt that they were sneered at by their brothers, could never be accepted for their power. For these warriors were indeed truly gifted at their trade, even amongst the staunch competition of their fellow Astartes. They found that they now excelled. I fear my scribbling station being invaded by diminutive thespians, but have to say it nonetheless. They became the very best at being bad guys. The chapter devolved into being a warband and rebranded, renamed themselves the Crimson Slaughter. But oh, how gifted they were at their trade, how ardent they were in their new beliefs, how mighty they were in the service of the great god Khorne. They were a force that excelled in his service, even going as far as fighting the legendary Dark Angels, not being annihilated as most do when confronting the mighty fighting first. But for these details, we must wait until I can perform a more in-depth entry on their relationship and battles, for this is an introduction to the Crimson Slaughter only. Now the Crimson Slaughter are so high in regard amongst their new peers, the Chaos Legions and Warbands, that they are tasked with independent activities by Abaddon the Despoiler himself. They accompany him on his black crusades and incursions into real space with verve, a verve that Abaddon utilizes well. Few worlds and forces are able to hear of their approach without a wail of grief or fear, for the Crimson Slaughter are butchers without peer, their assaults like a combined harvester, reaping all in their path. Few denizens of the warp and worshippers of the dark gods can claim such prestige and power so swiftly. It turned out that they found a spiritual home and place that was not to ever be gained whilst they were loyal Space Marines. The crying shame of it all is that they had such potential, outdid any of the same age as a chapter. They just did not ever feel it. The Blood Angels themselves once said of them that they were second only to they in the art of shock assault, a statement that chapters even twice or thrice their age would envy intensely. A great chapter had fallen due to the frailties and the forced competition that the Imperium used to motivate all of their warriors, most especially their Adeptus Astartes. a cautionary tale that will never be heeded, so more chapters will inevitably follow the path of the Crimson Sabres, who are now feared across the Imperium and the Warp as the Crimson Slaughter. Hence, do the powers of chaos, the forces of darkness, grow year on year, century by century. I have been Baldermort, your faithful servant. If you have enjoyed my introduction to the Crimson Slaughter, then please do consider liking and subscribing. Should you be a regular gentle listener, please do consider supporting us on Patreon. Now, no matter what you do today, do try to make some time for fun. Toodaloo.